Hi and welcome back to Finding Mojo. I'm Peter Ball, your host, and I'm also an author of a series of books, and today I thought I would read chapter 1 from my science fiction novel, The Winged Serpent of Time. Now this novel just recently won the Gold Award for Fiction at the Able Book Awards in Melbourne 2024. If you're interested in reading on from the end of chapter 1, I'll put a link below to where the book's available on Amazon with my other books. Now, this is an alternate history science fiction, so it's about a mission that never happened. Chapter 1, Part 1. Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California, 1973. Philip Clark, the balding director said as he exhaled, picking up the folder and scrutinising the cover from behind his desk. Yes, sir, but everyone calls me Zach, the younger man replied, standing at attention. Zach, how do you get that? The director asked, looking over his glasses. My middle name is Isaac. My father chose it after Isaac Newton. He'd hoped I'd be a scientist, sir. The young Air Force officer grinned. I see. Well, Zach, I understand we interrupted your vacation in Hawaii. Nice weather? Yes, sir, perfect. But to be honest, I was getting bored, Zach replied with a relaxed smile. He was the image of a military man, even out of uniform. Flat top, crew cut, back straight as a post. Ken Johnson, the director of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, pointed at a vacant chair and indicated the young man should sit. Then he poured himself a scotch. Drink, son? Zach's senses were suddenly on alert. Senior management never offered you a drink unless it was bad news. His whole body tensed. And the shrewd older man laughed and said, Relax, son, and have a drink with me. It's nothing bad. We'd like to discuss a proposal with you. A private discussion, however, one that can't leave this office. Do you understand? The director's tone was not lost on Zach, and he nodded sharply. Yes, sir. Now, son, I'm not military, and nor is this establishment, so enough with the formality, Ken said with a smile and poured them both a large scotch on ice. A toast to new adventures, Ken declared and raised his glass. Here's to that, Zach replied. He took a whiff of the fine single malt and sipped. It was better than his usual brand, and he relaxed a little, sat back and waited for whatever revelation was about to drop on him from on high. What could be worse than the last news we received a few months earlier, he thought with a shudder. The scrapping of the Apollo program the year before had been devastating to all those awaiting launch, including his own. Perhaps a new mission was on offer, but he dared not get his hopes too high. Ken moved around from behind the desk, taking the armchair opposite, carrying Zach's file. He opened it on his lap and read. Zach took a quick look around the office as he waited. It had the usual furniture, a couple of windows providing natural light, and a model of the lunar excursion model sitting on a shelf. The room was quiet, and the leather chair squeaked noisily as he shifted his weight. Ken looked up over his glasses. You're still single then? What kind of a question is that? Zach thought and nodded. Yeah, why is that important? It'll become clear, Ken replied mysteriously and continued reading. Zach was beginning to find this irritating and started to fidget with the bezel ring on his dive watch. Been keeping fit since Apollo? Kind of, Zach replied with a sheepish grin. The director read on in silence, and Zach, feeling frustrated, asked, Sorry, sir, with respect, can I ask what this is all about? The director closed the file, looked directly at the young astronaut, then took a sip from his glass and sighed. Okay. Perhaps we should wait for my other guest. Ken stood and held his drink as he paced. Zack waited in silence, his own drink forgotten. A knock at the door interrupted the tense silence. The secretary poked her head in and announced, "Mr. Frank Saunders for you, sir." Ken waved him in. When the door swung wide, Zack was surprised to see the NASA director entering the office. He couldn't help feeling hopeful that this was about a mission. Zack stood and shook the director's hand. Ken poured another scotch for the NASA director, who took up the third armchair. The older men glanced at each other. Ken raised his eyebrows and gestured for Frank to go ahead. The NASA director removed a thick spring-bound folder from his briefcase and placed it on the coffee table. He then cleared his throat. "So has Director Johnson explained it all to you then?" Zack looked from one man to the other and shook his head. He felt his face redden a little from both emotion and the scotch. "We have a mission. It's classified, and we need your word that whatever you decide, no news of this is to leave this office." "Clear?" Frank said, looking to Ken for support. Zack nodded. "It's a pretty audacious mission and a rather long one," Ken said with a forced smile. "But historic," Frank added, grinning. The young astronaut looked at both men, smiling at him like used car salesmen, and he wondered what they were going to ask of him. He stood up and walked over to the window, spreading his hands wide against the ledge as he gazed out at the crescent moon appearing pale in the daylight. "What's the mission?" Zack asked. "If it's the moon, I'm in," he added, hoping that he didn't sound too desperate. Both directors laughed out loud at this predictable bravado. It was well known that Lieutenant Zack Clark was a decorated war hero. No one questioned his courage. "That's commendable, son, but you really should hear the whole thing before you agree," Frank chuckled. Zack returned to his chair and the NASA director took the plain folder from the table and offered it to him. "The proposal is all outlined in there. It's still in the early stages of development, but much of the preliminary work has been completed. Now we need an astronaut to fly the mission." Zack opened the cover, feeling akin to a mild electric shock ran from the back of his head to his gut as he read the title of the mission, spelled out in black and white. "Classified, eyes only. Code name, Red Dust. Solo manned mission to Mars." Zack's head reeled and he felt like he was swaying. Surely this is a joke, he thought, and he looked up to see if they were laughing. Glancing from one director to the other in shocked silence before he asked, "For real?" End of chapter 1. If you'd like to find out what happened next, the book's available on Amazon. I'll leave the link below. Have a good day.